Hey everybody, John Lorden here with another episode of Itchy Mysteries. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This was a really tough watch. Let me just start off by saying that. Today we are looking into a film called Goodnight, Sugar Babe. And as usual, let's start with the synopsis from IMDB. The discovery of the mutilated body of a mentally challenged young mother begins a journey into madness that is so unbelievable, the mastermind behind the crime ultimately got away with murder. Revealing for the first time how and why it happened, filmmaker J. David Miles ventures into the insane mind of a small-town crime family's matriarch and uncovers a conspiracy that continues to elude law enforcement to this very day. By going straight to the murderers themselves for interviews, it is a true crime investigation like you have never seen, unveiling an alternate motive to what is presented in the courtroom that is as bizarre as it is heartbreaking. I think that's a pretty good summary of what's going on in this film. However, I do have to say, as I was watching it, it wasn't that clear. This is really a movie that feels a bit convoluted, but by the time you get to the end of it, you have a reasonably clear picture about what was being presented. I think that the filmmaker, in the way that he's telling the story, is not thinking, I don't want to say he's not thinking logically necessarily, but he's not giving you the story in an order that's very easy to determine what he's trying to highlight. What it comes off as feeling is like a bunch of kind of gossipy conversations. And through those gossipy conversations, you start putting the structure together of this truly horrific story that happened to this young woman, Vera Jo, who obviously had mental issues. Some people say that she had the mind of about an 8-year-old and she was in her mid-20s. She had a child of her own, but she was really treated awfully by this family, the Brooks family. I have to give anyone out there a bit of a warning if you're going to watch this for yourself. There is some graphic pictures that pop up in it. There is a little bit of cussing, but it's not too heavy on that. However, the descriptions of what is going on with the abuse that happens to Vera Jo is horrible. It's about every bad thing you could think that they could do to a person, and then some. It is truly, truly terrible. There's also some really bad things that just happened in this family even before she kind of fell into it in a strange way. We're talking stories of incest among the family members and some really hard to stomach conversation. And it's all presented to you kind of in this talking head format. So very tough watch, but I do feel like there were some things about it that worked pretty well. Like I said, by the time you get to the end, you have a good idea of what's going on here. There's a little bit of a sense of injustice. I believe this was produced back in 2013. There has been some news updates since this film was done. So once you get to the end of this, if you are going to check it out for yourself, I highly recommend you do a quick Google search so you can see what happened, particularly to the matriarch that they're mentioning in that summary, because I got to tell you, as I was watching this thing, I felt like I was looking at the devil. I mean, this woman is just amazingly evil, in my opinion, after watching this film. And there is some news updates on her you might want to check out for yourself. I went looking for this online. It was not easy to find. Their official film site is down. There seems to be a couple of copies on YouTube, which I'm sure are not official. I did find a Vimeo link that is official where you can rent it or purchase it. So I will include that in the links below. It looks like if you are in the UK, if you go to Amazon in the UK, I think you can actually rent it out there as well. It might even be part of Prime, where you can watch it if you're already subscribed to their Prime service. And for here in the US, I did find a listing for it in the US, but not to watch it streaming. It's a listing for a DVD that is supposedly going to be released in December. So if you really don't want to shell out a couple bucks to rent it on Vimeo or something like that, you can see a version of it on DVD by the end of this year. Now, the big question, I think, is Do I recommend that you do that? And I knew this was going to be a little tricky because I think there are certain types of people that will appreciate this film. I think there are other types of people that the kind of chatty conversational dialogue and the way that it's presented, where the facts aren't really laid out, the story isn't structured very well. I was sitting there going, I wish they would have just had one slide where they could show us how these people are all related. Like have a picture of this person here and have a little stick that shows that they're connected to these people. There are so many people speaking in this, and it's kind of hard to keep straight who's who, particularly at the beginning. So there's some things just in terms of how it's presented that I don't feel were very strong. Nothing really great going on here in terms of cinematography, nothing going on at all in terms of music, at least that I can recall. However, you guys know one of the things that I look for in these documentaries is this giving me a view into a lifestyle that I myself don't live? And that certainly is true of this piece. Now, this is looking into an area in particular where it seems like there is a lot of uneducated people that don't have a whole lot. They kind of put their value of what's important in their lives into other things that personally I find extremely questionable and would not value in my own life. But it still does serve that purpose of giving you a perspective for a specific section of people that is much different than a lot of the lifestyles that I imagine you viewers are living all over the world. But the people, at least some of the people that are shown in this, you just get this feeling of course they're stuck. Of course they're not going to get out of this. Just look at the lives that they're leading. Look at the decisions that they're making. One of the toughest things for me in watching this documentary was avoiding the feeling of just judging everyone that's popping up in this documentary as being a terrible, horrible person. Because when this documentary came through and all of a sudden there was cameras around and attention to be had, everyone is sure to pipe up about the stories that they know about this poor young woman's abuse. But did they talk up when it was actually going on? Did they contact the authorities and try to get her help? It's really, really tough. I've never really come out of a documentary like this with this feeling of I don't like the people that were represented in this document. Like the majority of the people in this documentary, I don't like them. I would prefer that they were not a part of my life. However, that's why films like this I think are kind of important. Like I said, they can give us a view into how other people live and think or sometimes don't think, maybe in this case. Not a whole lot in terms of television news coverage footage or anything like that. A little bit of courtroom footage, but not a very good explanation of what's going on there. I feel like the scope of this documentary is a little bit beyond the hands of the director and the editor. I think that in different hands, if this story was being retold and being presented in a little bit more of a logical and in some places concise, because there's just so much information being thrown at you, fashion, it could have made it a lot easier to understand, might have given this documentary a bit more for some of us in the audience to grab onto. However, if you like listening to gossipy type dialogue, I think you'll be able to get through this, and then by the end, I do think that you'll have a good understanding, like I did, of what actually happened in this case. Which is ultimately what this documentary is supposed to do, right? I don't even know if raising exposure in this case really helps it, outside of the fact that now there was people that didn't know about this family, me, that now know about this family and don't like them very much. But outside of that, I always look to these things. Are there lessons to be learned here? I do think that in this documentary, there are some lessons to be learned. Particularly about mentally challenged adults, about how there's this kind of difficult balance that I think has to be found with family members of mentally challenged adults, where they give them their freedom to go live their life, but there still has to be elements of kind of watching over them. I mean, not in a way where you want to impede their decisions or, limit them from being able to stretch out and develop in their own ways. But I think there has to be this kind of balance, and I imagine it has to be really, really tough, particularly for parents of these individuals, in dealing with that as they get older. So a couple of really hard questions and things to think about came out of this documentary for me. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 6, and I think right now on IMDb it rates around a 7, 7.5, something like that. Like I said, just structure problems for me. I really had to decide that I was going to bear with it and get through it, and I did. And now I kind of understand what it was about, but I just wish that it was presented in a little bit of a different way, particularly at the beginning. I'll tell you, it would have made such a huge difference if they would have included a few local news clips covering the case maybe, or when her body was found, just right at the start, so that it gave us some structured conversation about what the crime actually was, or at least what people thought it was at the point that television broadcast was done. And then we could have built on from that with all this dialogue from these supposed family members, as well as her real family members. They keep comparing themselves to the Manson family, and honestly, I don't think they were far off. It's a car crash in terms of humanity, but I think that some of you out there will enjoy it, so I just wanted to tell you about that. Conversational dialogue, if you're not into that, skip it. You could still learn about this case by reading on it online. You'd probably get through it a lot quicker. If you do like that gossipy kind of dialogue, there is tons of it to be had here. If you're a dentist, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of stuff in here that might scare you. I was kind of blown away by some of the things that I saw going on here with people's dental practices, let me just say. Oh, man, and I know it sounds terrible, but there was still something in it. I think the spirit of this young woman, and the fact that you want to see justice served, that makes it worthwhile, and it makes it worth going through this experience, so you can think about these questions and maybe learn a couple lessons for yourself. That's it for today's Itchy Mysteries. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you're having a great one out there, and I will see you back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.